The night everything broke. I have carried silence for as long as I can remember. It wraps around me like a second skin, binding me to memories I wish I could erase. My name is Aaliya, and my story does not begin with joy or laughter, but with betrayal, blood, and a secret that shattered my childhood forever. I was born a twin, alongside my sister Amna, into a house where love was conditional and silence was survival. My father, Rashid, never wanted daughters. For him, daughters were burdens, fragile branches that could not carry the weight of his pride. He longed for sons to inherit his name, his land, his shadow. When my mother, Nazia, gave birth to not one daughter, but two, something inside him curdled into hatred. From the beginning, I felt the tension in the walls of our small home. Rashid's words toward my mother were sharp, laced with ridicule. He called her weak, cursed her body for failing him. I remember the way Amna clung to Nazia's scarf when his voice rose, her tiny fists trembling with fear. My mother would stroke our hair, whispering, "Patience, my girls. One day the storm will pass." But the storm never passed, it only deepened. The fracture widened the day my mother discovered Rashid's infidelity. It was not a hidden thing, he flaunted it. Her name was Saira, a woman with painted lips and a gaze that lingered too long. Rashid's loyalty had already left our home, replaced by nights spent elsewhere and mornings reeking of perfume that was not my mother's. For Nazia, the betrayal was worse than the beatings. She endured his cruelty in silence, but the affair carved wounds in her spirit no comfort could heal. As children, Amna and I pieced together truths we were too young to bear. We saw the exchanged glances, the late-night absences, the whispered arguments when my mother confronted him. I remember Nazia's eyes glistening with tears as she sat by the window, her face pale under the moonlight. She once murmured, more to herself than to us, "A woman can forgive many things, but a man who betrays her heart burns her from the inside out." The breaking point came on a night heavy with rain. The wind howled through the cracks in our roof, and the world outside seemed to echo the chaos brewing inside our walls. I was 11, old enough to understand but powerless to stop what unfolded. Rashid returned home, his shirt unbuttoned, his breath sharp with drink. My mother met him in the courtyard, her courage trembling but intact. "Rashid," she said, her voice steady though her hand shook, "I will no longer stay silent. You dishonor me, and you shame our daughters. End this affair, or end this marriage." His eyes narrowed, dark with rage. "You dare dictate terms to me, woman? You, who gave me nothing but 2 mouths to feed and no sons to carry my name." Her defiance only enraged him further. Words turned to shouts, shouts to blows. Amna and I crouched in the corner of the room, our fingers laced together as the storm raged between them. I wanted to scream, to stop him, but fear rooted me to the floor. And then, in a heartbeat that split my world in two, it happened. Rashid's hands, once the hands that carried me as a child, wrapped around my mother's throat. Nazia struggled, her nails clawing at his arms, her voice a strangled gasp. The thunder outside drowned her final cry. When silence fell, it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of death. Amna's sobs shook her body as I held her close, my own tears blinding me. Rashid stood over my mother's lifeless form, his chest heaving, his eyes cold. There was no remorse, only contempt. He spat on the ground and muttered, "This is what happens to women who defy me." That night, the world as I knew it collapsed. My mother, the only light in our darkness, was gone, extinguished not by fate, but by the man who should have protected her. I realized then that Rashid was not just my father. He was the enemy of my existence. His betrayal was not only against my mother, but against us all. From that night forward, silence became my companion, and survival became my mission. Amna and I buried our grief in secrecy, too terrified to speak of the truth. To the world, Nazia's death was explained as an accident, a fall, a twist of fate. Only we knew the real story. Only we carried the weight of betrayal in our chests. And though we were children, we understood one thing with clarity. The storm had only begun. Shadows of survival. The days after my mother's death blurred into one long, suffocating nightmare. The house smelled of silence, heavy and sharp, as though grief itself had seeped into the bricks. Amna and I moved through the rooms like ghosts, our eyes swollen from tears we dared not shed aloud. Rashid had forbidden mourning. Do not speak her name, he ordered, his voice flat, his gaze like stone. She is gone. Forget her. But how does a child forget the warmth of the only soul who ever loved her? We did not forget. We remembered in whispers, in the way Amna clutched our mother's scarf at night, in the way I traced patterns on the floor where nausea once sat spinning stories for us. Every silence carried her memory. Every bruise of Rashid's temper reminded us of what we had lost. Life became labor. Rashid, now unburdened by a wife he despised, poured his scorn onto us. At dawn, he would rattle the doors and drag us outside. Work, he snapped, thrusting baskets into our arms. We collected fodder for cattle, fetched water from the well, cooked, cleaned, bent our backs until our bodies ached. Childhood was stripped from us like a stolen garment. But there was something worse than the work, his indifference. He looked at us not as daughters, but as obligations he regretted. His eyes held no warmth, only the disappointment of a man who wished us unborn. And in the shadows of his life lurked Saira, the woman for whom he had destroyed everything. She visited often, gliding into our home with perfumes that clashed against the stench of sweat and soil. Her laughter was sharp, mocking. She stroked Rashid's arm as though we were invisible. Sometimes she threw us glances, curled in contempt, as if to remind us of our mother's defeat. To her, we were relics of a failed marriage, obstacles to her possession of Rashid. It was in those days of endless work and quiet grief that we first saw Khalid. He was known in the village as the massive farmer, a man with broad shoulders and a presence that filled every space. But there was no arrogance in him. His strength seemed gentler than the rumors that carried his name. One evening, as Amna and I labored in the fields beyond our boundary, he approached. "You girls shouldn't be carrying such weight," he said, his voice low, steady, more kindness than we had heard in years. I froze. No man had spoken to us with gentleness since our mother died. Amna shifted nervously, clutching her shawl tighter. "We're used to it," I replied, though the tremor in my voice betrayed me. His eyes lingered on the bruises at my wrist, marks I had tried to hide beneath cloth. He said nothing more, but I felt his silence was not indifference, it was understanding. From that day, Khalid's presence wove itself into our lives like a quiet thread. He offered water when we worked near his land, sometimes slipped extra grain into our baskets, small gestures of care that seemed revolutionary in our barren world. I did not name it then, but something stirred inside me, a fragile bloom of trust. Emma noticed too. "You look at him differently," she whispered one night as we lay on the mat. I turned away, embarrassed. He is only kind, nothing more. But kindness in a world built on cruelty felt like a forbidden luxury. Meanwhile, Rashid's obsession with Saira grew. He spent less time at home, leaving us to manage the household alone. At first, his absence felt like relief, but soon it became danger. Villagers whispered about his shamelessness, about how he paraded Saira in public. The shame clung to us too, though we were innocent of his sins. One evening, Amna returned from the market with eyes wide and frightened. "They say father plans to sell land for her." For Saira. The words cut me sharper than any blade. Our land was not wealth, it was survival. Without it, we would be cast adrift, powerless. Rashid's betrayal did not end with our mother. It was stretching, tightening, ready to strangle us too. That night, as Amna cried silently, I stared at the moon outside our window and made a vow. I would not allow history to repeat. My mother had been silenced by betrayal, but I would not be. If there was even a sliver of hope, even a whisper of protection, I would find it, even if it meant trusting a man again. And in the back of my mind, a face returned, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, the farmer whose silence carried more safety than my father's words ever had. The weight of betrayal. The whispers began as murmurs, but in a village nothing stays hidden for long. By the time summer ripened the fields, everyone knew of Rashid's shameless affair. At the well, women covered their mouths and spoke of him with disgust. In the marketplace, men shook their heads, muttering about his dishonor. Yet Rashid walked among them with his chin raised, Saira at his side, as though betrayal were a crown he wore with pride. For Amna and me, the shame was suffocating. Every glance carried judgment. Every whispered laugh pierced like a blade. We had committed no sin, yet we bore the weight of our father's choices. One evening, as we carried baskets of grain home, an older woman stopped us. "Your poor mother," she said softly, her eyes filled with pity. She deserved better than what he gave her. The words almost broke me. I bit my tongue until it bled, swallowing the urge to scream the truth, that our mother had not simply been wronged but murdered. But silence was still our prison. At home, Rashid grew more brazen. He no longer hid Saira's presence. She dined in our house, her laughter echoing through rooms that once belonged to my mother. She sat at the head of the table, her jeweled fingers drumming against wood, while Rashid watched her, as though she were queen. To us, she offered nothing but contempt. One night, I overheard their conversation. "You must rid yourself of them," Saira hissed, her voice sharp as a blade. "Two grown girls in the house will only bring gossip. Marry me, and let them find their own fate." Rashid's reply was chilling in its simplicity. Soon, I fled before they saw me, my heart pounding. His betrayal was not finished. It was evolving, threatening to erase us as he had erased my mother. Amna trembled when I told her. "What will we do?" she whispered. "Where will we go?" I had no answer. Yet, in the midst of despair, a memory returned, the quiet strength of Khalid's eyes. The next day, while gathering fodder near his land, I found him repairing a broken fence. He looked up as I approached, his gaze lingering on the weariness in my face. "You're carrying more than you should," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Something inside me cracked. The words spilled before I could stop them. "He wants to cast us out. My father, he plans to marry her." Khalid set down his tools, his expression darkening. "Saira," I nodded, shame heating my cheeks. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with quiet resolve, he answered, "You and your sister will not be abandoned. Not while I live." His promise ignited a dangerous warmth in my chest. No one had defended me since my mother's death. The thought of safety, of shelter, wrapped around me like sunlight piercing storm clouds. But with it came guilt. My mother had been destroyed by infidelity, and here I was, my heart reaching toward another man. Was I betraying her memory? That night, as Amna and I lay on our mat, she turned to me with wide eyes. "You love him," she said, not accusing, only certain. I swallowed hard. I don't know what love is anymore. But in the darkness, I admitted to myself what I could not say aloud. I longed for Khalid's protection, his steadiness, the way his silence felt safer than words. Meanwhile, Rashid's betrayal deepened. He began selling portions of land, grain, even livestock. The neighbors whispered that he was preparing for a new life with Saira. We watched as our inheritance, the soil our mother had tended with her hands, slipped through his grasp into hers. Each loss was another wound carved into us. The villagers, once silent, began to murmur louder. One day, I overheard two men at the market. "He dishonors his wife's grave." One spat. "And what of the daughters? What fate awaits them?" The other replied. Their words lingered long after I returned home. The truth was clear. Our father's betrayal was no longer a private wound. It was a public shame, dragging us down with him. That night, Rashid returned late, reeking of wine, Saira on his arm. He announced his decision without preamble. "In a month, I will wed her," he declared, his eyes daring us to object. "This house will be hers. You too, find your own path." Amna gasped, tears welling in her eyes. I stood still, my blood pounding, rage burning in my chest. I wanted to shout, to reveal the truth of our mother's death, but fear held me back. One wrong word could end us as it ended her. But as I stared at him, I knew something with certainty. If he would not protect us, I would find someone who could. And in the shadows of my resolve, one name pulsed like a heartbeat: Khalid. Breaking the silence. The month that followed Rashid's announcement was the longest of my life. Every day felt like a countdown, each sunrise tightening the rope of fear around our throats. Amna grew thinner, her eyes shadowed with dread. I, too, carried the weight, but beneath it burned a fire I could no longer smother. Saira began moving into our lives with open arrogance. She rearranged the kitchen, demanded new furniture, and discarded what had once been my mother's possessions. Each insult was a blade slicing away the last remnants of Nazia's memory. And Rashid, our father in name only, watched her with devotion that bordered on worship. One evening, as Amna and I scrubbed the courtyard floor, Saira stood over us. "Your time here is ending," she sneered. "Rashid promised me a house without burdens. You two will leave once we are wed. Perhaps you should start packing." Amna's hands shook. I held her steady, swallowing the rage that boiled within me. Silence had once protected us, but silence could no longer save us. That night, I made a decision. I saw Khalid. The moon was bright as I crossed into his fields. He was there, mending ropes by lantern light. When he saw me, his brow furrowed with concern. "What brings you here so late?" The words spilled like a flood I could no longer contain. I told him everything: the affair, the land sales, Saira's threats, my mother's death. For the first time, I spoke the truth aloud, my voice breaking under the weight of years of silence. When I finished, Khalid stood in stillness, his jaw clenched, his eyes fierce with anger, not at me, but for me. "Your mother's blood cries for justice," he said. "This ends now." The next day, Rashid gathered the villagers for a feast to announce his marriage. Saira arrived adorned in silks, her smile triumphant. But beneath the surface, tension rippled. Whispers ran through the crowd, suspicion simmering. And when Rashid stood to speak, Khalid stepped forward. "Before this man declares vows," Khalid said, his voice steady and loud, "the truth must be spoken." The crowd fell silent. Rashid's eyes narrowed. "This is not your affair, farmer." But Khalid did not yield. "It became my affair the moment you tried to discard your daughters, the moment you stained this village with betrayal. You were dishonor like a cloak, Rashid, and it is time all saw what lies beneath it." Gasps rose as the villagers turned to one another. Rashid's face darkened with fury. "Be careful what you accuse me of." I stepped forward then, my voice trembling but resolute. "He murdered my mother." The words cracked the air like thunder. The crowd erupted in disbelief and shock. Amna wept beside me, nodding, confirming the truth. "You lie." Rashid roared, his face twisted with rage. "You dare slander me, ungrateful children?" But the villagers pressed closer, murmuring, recalling the bruises Nazia bore, the nights filled with shouts, the suddenness of her death. The pieces fit together like shards forming a blade. Saira's smile faltered. She drew back from Rashid, sensing the shift of power. "You didn't tell me this," she hissed. Rashid lunged toward me, his hand raised, but Khalid stepped between us. With a force I had never seen, he shoved Rashid back. "You will not touch her again," he said, his voice a growl of thunder. The crowd surged, their whispers now chants of condemnation. Rashid, once feared, now stood alone, stripped of authority, his sins laid bare. Saira slipped away, abandoning him the moment his power crumbled. Rashid looked around, eyes wild, but found no ally. With a final curse, he fled into the night, his shadow swallowed by darkness. In the silence that followed, I felt my knees weaken. Khalid's hand steadied me, strong and sure. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The villagers turned to us, their gazes softer now, pity and respect mingled. They spoke of giving us shelter, of helping us rebuild what had been stolen. But as gratitude swelled, grief returned too. My mother was gone. No victory could bring her back. The scars would never fully fade. That night, under the same stars my mother once gazed upon, Amna and I sat beside Khalid. He spoke little, but his presence was enough. I felt the stirrings of something fragile yet enduring. Hope. And as the dawn rose, painting the sky with light, I whispered a vow not just for myself, but for all we had lost. Silence no longer defines me. I will carry her memory, and I will choose a life of dignity, even if it is carved from ruins.